Hello everybody and welcome to Notorious Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm Notorious Cly and this is Rokket Orcust, the deck responsible for the toxic combo you saw in one of my latest videos. I've been wanting to add a little bit of structure to these deck profiles. I think it'll be helpful for me when making the video and then also helpful to all of you. So when you click into one of these deck profiles, you know about what to expect. We're going to break this down into three parts: the introduction, a card by card, and then expectations. In the introduction, I'm going to give you an overview of what the deck wants to do, talk about some of the cool interactions or interesting things that it does, and how it wants to do them. In the card by card, I am going to go over every card on the deck list and expand on some of the points I've made in the introduction, in addition to explaining ratios and potential replacement cards and any other thing that comes to mind when going over all the cards. And last but not least is expectations. I am a firm believer in properly setting expectations in both my personal and professional life, and I don't think that's going to change here. The last thing I want to be is a hype Yugi tuber who tries to sell you that this deck profile is the next tier 0 meta killer, unbeatable, unstoppable, undefeated, never gonna lose deck, only for you all to get excited, trust me on it, build it, play it, realize it's mid at best, and then hate me a week later. If something is good, I will tell you it's good. If something isn't, I will tell you it isn't. I'm going to get some stuff wrong. That's inevitable, but at least you'll know I'm always being honest with you. There's a fourth unofficial part, and that's going to be test hands. All of these deck profiles, or almost all of these deck profiles, are going to have test hands associated with them, but they're going to be in another video. I want to keep these videos kind of short and to the point, and I'm doing a bad job at that. So let's get right into the deck profile, starting with the introduction. This is Rokket Orcust, or Blast Off to Babel as I'm calling it. It features 3 different engines or archetypes, whatever you want to call them, put together that, when used correctly, and quite frankly, if I'm being honest, when drawn correctly, complement each other very well. The 3 engines are Rokket, Orcust, and Iblee lock. The deck is first and foremost an Iblee lock deck. While I believe the Rokket engine and the Orcust engine are pretty good at what they do and can do some good things, I don't think anything the engines can do on their own is good enough to win a lot of games at a high level. That's why we're going to use and abuse the Iblee lock to buy those engines enough time to get going and do what they need to do. I'm not a fan of the Iblee lock, but as long as it's here, as long as it's legal, we're going to use it, we're going to abuse it, so hopefully we can have fun with the wide, versatile, and fun toolboxes that Orcust and Rokket provide us. Don't hate the player, hate Konami for putting toxic floodgates in their game. Speaking of toxic floodgates, this deck has one of the most toxic interactions I've seen or discovered. It is the Iblee lock that I showcased in one of my previous videos. I've been calling it the Silver Bullet lock, in honor of Silver Rokket. It's a 2.5 card combo that, when done correctly, will Iblee lock your opponent and has the potential to snipe their only out from their extra deck, leaving them permanently under Iblee lock, allowing you all the time in the world to do whatever it is you want to do. The combo is 2.5 cards, so it is not exactly consistent, but you will see it often enough that it will be effective. That's enough for the introduction. Let's move on to the card by card. And for the card by card, we're going to start with Rokket Tracer. I'm playing 2 copies because I'm never really disappointed if I see it in my hand. Rokket Tracer is a great normal summon, but I don't want to see a ton of them in my hand. Ideally, I would like to keep at least 1 copy in deck for use with Quick Launch, which we are playing 3 copies of. This card is broken, and if you need an explanation on why it's broken, I also made a Rokket primer, which explains the Rokket engine a little more in depth. Please go check that out if you need a little more explanation. If you're not familiar with these cards, it'll save both you and me a bunch of times. I do not want to have to keep explaining the same 3 cards to you guys over and over and over again. So if you have any questions, go check out that video. And if you don't have all your questions answered at the end of that video, just hit me up on Discord or Twitter or even the YouTube comment section. And our last piece of the Rokket engine is Silver Rokket Dragon. Silver Rokket Dragon has a pretty cool effect. When it's targeted by the effect of a link monster, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and banish 1 card from it. This is the key component of the Super Iblee lock, Silver Bullet lock, where you snipe their only out to the Iblee lock. In addition to that, Silver Rokket Dragon is also a level 4, which pairs up great with the level 4 Tracer, opens up a whole toolbox of options for us. Rank 4s, Synchro 8s, even just generic link fodder. There's not really anything the Rokket engine can't do. Tracer in this build specifically also has a unique role. If you can get an Orcust and Tracer on the field at the same time, you can use Tracer to pop the Orcust, special summon another Rokket from deck, and then have the Orcust in grave, which is where they want to be. One of the struggles of an Orcust deck or an Orcust engine is getting Orcusts into the grave and into rotation. We'll cover that in a little bit when we cover the Orcust cards, but just know that Tracer helps out. Skills I've been thinking about playing with this list are anything that puts a card face up on your side of the field, whether that be a field spell skill or something like Middle Age Max that puts Ancient Gear Castle face up on your side of the field. All you're looking for is a free card that is face up, so a normal summon Tracer instantly becomes 2 material. Another skill I've been thinking about playing is Lured by Darkness. We play a lot of dark monsters, so we would be able to use the skill to restock our hand a little bit. I'm not completely sold on it. I think I like the ability to always have Tracer online with the face-up card on our side of the field. There's always the chance that Varus has another skill that's added during his event rerun that completely changes this deck, but until now, I think I'm just going to rock probably with Mako Tsunami Umi. Next up is our Orcust engine. This is something I've been toying around with. I'm still not quite sure about the exact number of Orcust numbers to play. All I know is that Orcust Heartbore is the best one, so we're playing 3 copies of it. I want to see this in my starting hand because we do have some outlets to get it from the hand to the graveyard, and Heartbore is the best one. All of the Orcusts have a shared effect. When they are in your graveyard, they can banish themselves from the graveyard to special summon an Orcust from another location. Heartbore specials from deck, Symbol Skeleton specials from graveyard, and Brass Bombard specials from hand. The Symbol Skeleton and the Brass Bombard aren't as useful in this list. Normally you'll see the Symbol Skeletons played at a 2 in an Orcust list. I'm down here at 1 because we're trying to do non-traditional Orcust things. I like having the extra name in Symbol Skeleton, but I don't want to see a ton of this, and I almost never want to see it in my starting hand. If I'm going to see one, I want it to be Heartbore. One thing to note about Brass Bombard, it is a level 1 tuner, which does open up a world of possibilities for potential synchro plays, but I don't think that'll come up too much with this intended list. And the last little piece of our Orcust engine, I guess if you want to call it that, is Dark World Dealings. Dark World Dealings is one of the ways we can get Orcust from our hand into the graveyard, and potentially cycle our deck for a key combo piece that we're missing. There are other cards that a traditional Orcust list plays to get them from the hand or field to the graveyard, such as Orchestrated Return, but we're not playing a high enough number of Orcust monsters that I feel comfortable playing something like Orchestrated Return. They also notably use Machina Fortress to discard them and get the free special summon, but again, we're not playing a high enough number of machine monsters for me to feel comfortable playing Machina Fortress. And next up is Nightmare Corruptor Iblee. This is part of the Iblee lock engine. It is 3 copies of Nightmare Corruptor Iblee and 2 Signet Mining to find the Nightmare Corruptor Iblee. Signet Mining also has a cool use to get Orcust monsters from your hand into the graveyard. That's what we want to do with them. We need to get them in the graveyard. Signet Mining is a great way to do it because it allows us to get to the Iblee lock as well. Iblee doesn't really need any introduction at this point in time. It is the floodgate that we all hate, and we're going to use it and abuse it as much as we can. Again, don't hate the player. Hate Konami for putting toxic floodgates in the game when they didn't have to. I also think it's worth jumping to the extra deck for just a quick second here to finish off our Iblee lock engine, and that's Nightmare Mermaid. Nightmare Mermaid is the link we're going to go into from Iblee to get Iblee into the grave, so we can then special summon Iblee to our opponent's side of the field. Nightmare Mermaid also has a cool effect. You can discard 1 card to special summon a Nightmare monster from your deck. Nightmare Corruptor Iblee is a Nightmare monster. So we can use Nightmare Mermaid off of the Iblee normal summon to discard, hopefully an Orcust, to special summon another Iblee from deck. That's one of the main reasons why I'm playing 3 copies of Iblee. I want to always have the copy in deck so I can use the Nightmare Mermaid to get another material on board to continue link climbing. In addition to that, I also want to always be able to find the Iblee lock. This is an Iblee lock deck. We need to be able to find it. The last 3 cards in the main deck could realistically be anything. I'm playing Dark Hole and TTH because they're great blowout cards that can really shut down your opponent. And in addition to that, in an emergency, they can take an Orcust and put it from the field to the graveyard. That's not where you want to be, but it's always nice to have a worst case scenario plan. In addition to that, I think Dark Hole is going to be pretty good in this list because I think it's going to have a hard time going second. This does have a pretty wide toolbox, but I don't think we'll have the easiest time getting to that toolbox when we're trying to play through our opponent's interaction and disruption. So Dark Hole is a great blowout. One card I wish I could fit in the main deck would be MST. Because of the aforementioned problem, I think we're going to have a hard time playing into our opponent's board. MST is great for clearing the back row and paving the way for our engines to do their thing. Let's move on to the extra deck. Part of the extra deck includes everything you're seeing here in the side deck. Well, most everything you're seeing here in the side deck. And that's one of the things I love about this list in particular. The toolbox it has access to is incredibly wide and incredibly versatile. There's really no right way to play it, partially because I haven't play tested this list and figured out which interactions are the best for the current meta. But also, there's no right way to play it because you're never really locked into anything except for dark monsters. If I didn't mention that earlier, the Orcust, when they use their effect, they lock you into special summoning only dark monsters, and Tracer locks you into only dark monsters from the extra deck when it uses its effect. That's not a problem. The dark toolbox in the extra deck is incredible, and we're playing only dark monsters in the main deck, so no harm, no foul. The cards I'm intending to run, if I do end up playing this list on the ranked ladder, are Nightmare Mermaid for the Iblee lock, Drek Black for the Silver Bullet lock, and it's just a good generic Link 2. It's not great that it's not dark, but the Silver Bullet lock is too tempting to pass up. Next up is Brute Enforcer, just a good generic dark Link 2, and you can discard one card to target one face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it. They can discard and negate, but I really like that it's an accessible dark Link 2 that also discards, hopefully, an Orcust monster. It's always nice too to know that if you do have to play into your opponent's board, you always have Brute Enforcer to hopefully start forcing some interaction or tearing apart their board. Next up is Yugioh Talker. This is just a good generic Link 3 to get into, and if you are able to get extra material on board, it can get you some targeting protection. In addition to that, being a 2300 attacker is not terrible. If you consider we're going to be Iblee locking our opponent quite a bit, Yugioh Talker should be big enough to clear anything that they're normal summoning if they can't link off the Iblee. Next up is Borreload Dragon. This deck is probably going to struggle a little bit to make Borreload turn 1, but turn 3 and potentially turn 2 with the extra card in your hand, you should be able to get the Borreload. There's a particularly nasty combo that allows you to get Borreload Dragon and the Silver Bullet Iblee lock all in one turn. It's not consistent at all. I believe it's an exact 4-card combo or a 3.5-card combo, which is not something you want to rush your laurels on. But it's Borreload Dragon, it's new, it's flashy, it's fun, and it's a house. If you can make this, you're probably going to win. Other Link monsters that I thought about playing were the Nightmares. Good generic extra deck staples, we all know and love them. Unicorn is the only one that is dark, which is one of the reasons that led me to not include the other two Nightmares. And the thought process behind Unicorn is a spin is very powerful, and it is nice that it does discard a card, but by the time we're making a Link 3, we would hopefully already have our Orcust engine online. I don't think you'd be wrong if you played Unicorn, but I like the going first potential upside and the grind game upside of Yugioh Talker if we can give it the targeting protection. Next up is Quadboral. I thought about playing this, but needing 2 dragon monsters, including a rocket monster, is too restricted for this deck. We're only playing 3 dragons, 3 rockets. Not consistent enough to consider playing, especially when you consider that its effect is basically Brute Enforcer with the upside of a draw. Brute Enforcer is just generic and easier to get into for us. Penistag, just a good generic Link 2. If you don't want to play Track Black, I'd probably play Penistag, or I would trade Track Black in for one of these Synchro or XE toolbox monsters. It's always good to have Piercing, especially when you consider that we're going to be Iblee locking our opponent. They may just be setting monsters trying to wall up and defend. If we can make Penistag, we can start piercing and start chipping away at their life points. And lastly is Topologic Bomber Dragon. This is probably a little bit easier to make than the Borreload Dragon since it only requires 2 monsters and Borreload requires 3. But its effect, while good, is easily played around as long as your opponent isn't playing a Link deck. One thing some people might not know about Topologic Bomber Dragon is that its effect triggers when a monster is summoned to a zone a Link monster points to. Does not have to be Bomber Dragon, just have to be a zone that a Link monster points to. Pretty cool monster, and at the very least, it's a 3000 attack beater. Synchros, going back to the extra deck and what I'm intending to play. Darken Dragon, sending is so good. Getting into a Synchro 8 is going to be super easy. We're playing a lot of 4s, and Rocket Tracer is level 4 tuner. Makes it really easy to get into. love this guy. I'm at the point where you really have to convince me not to play Dark End Dragon if I can. And then Yazi. Yazi is kind of the same thought process as Decode Talker. I really like the potential of getting targeting protection. And then with the 3 Harp Horror, we should have pretty consistent access to get Symbol Skeleton, which is our only 3 on board. And hopefully that's good enough. There may be a chance where we don't see the Iblee engine and we need something to do turn 1. And Yazi might be good enough just to buy us a turn or 2. And then lastly, as the XZ, I have Malevolent Sin. I'm choosing this one specifically over something like Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon, because we are going to be Iblee locking our opponent again if they're going to start walling up and setting monsters. I want the ability to remove one of those monsters from the field and start attacking their life points. Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon just has to smash through everything, where Malevolent Sin can get it out of the way and swing directly. It's also particularly nasty when you realize you could Iblee lock your opponent, use Malevolent Sin to yeet the Iblee until their standby phase, swing, go to end phase, standby phase, Iblee comes back and they're under the Iblee lock again. That's just torture at that point. That's rude and mean, but also kind of hilarious. Maybe I am turning into a toxic Yu-Gi-Oh player. That's not good at all. Other options that you can include pretty much anywhere in the toolbox. Eva Swarm Nightmare, not bad. Flip special summon monster face down, Roach. We all know it. None of us understand its effect. The Hot Red Dragon Archfiend or Infernity Doom Dragon. Great options if you don't have access to Dark End, especially with Doom Dragon, it's free to play. So it's really cool. Big Beater can destroy and burn some stuff. And then, I mean, really, the world is your oyster. Do as your heart desires with the extra deck. I personally believe that this deck is going to be at its best when it's a Link climbing deck and sprinkles in some of the toolbox Synchro and Xyz monster. But I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to see what all of you come up with. And let's go ahead and cover our last couple monsters in the side deck over here. I do think there is probably a worse version of this deck that features either Desperado Barrel Dragon or Dark Arm Dragon. Barrel Dragon is great because the Orcust are dark machines, and it's a retrain of one of my favorite monsters from when I was a kid, but battle phase effects are a little too slow. I'm afraid Desperado Barrel Dragon's time and place is past. As much as I love the guy, I just don't think it works as well as the Iblee lock in this list. Dark Arm Dragon, we, in theory, have really good control over the number of dark monsters that hits our graveyard, because we can always use them as overlay materials, or we can use the Orcusts to banish themselves. But the problem with Dark Arm Dragon is it's not searchable. The only way I've seen it be searchable is in an Ojama list, and I don't think Rokket Orcust Ojama is really something I even want to attempt building. If you can find another way to search Dad, please let me know. I'd love to be able to take Dad out for ice cream, go to a ball game, have him tell me he's proud of me, all that kind of stuff. Before we move on to expectations, I just want to give a quick shout out to Rio DZ and Gratis Keck. Rio DZ is the one who prompted me to try building Rokket Orcust next. They commented on one of my YouTube videos, and here we are with this monstrosity featuring a very toxic interaction. Also, Gratis Keck helped me by hooking me up with a pure Orcust list. It had been a while since I'd seen what Orcust had done. I hadn't really kept up with them since they were doing Desperado Barrel Dragon shenanigans, and it was a good refresher. So shout out to you two. Thanks for the help. Thanks for the inspiration. Let's move on to expectations. Expectations. I believe this list is a King of Games level list. The Iblee lock is kind of a menace right now. Yes, there are plenty of decks that can play around it. Yes, there are plenty of decks that can just play right through it. But there are enough decks out there that Iblee just completely invalidates that I think you will be able to string together enough wins to get the King of Games. Especially when you consider the flexibility and versatility that both the Rokket engine and the Orcust engine provide you. Do I think it will be the easiest King of Games climb? Probably not. I don't think this list is going to be meta-defining or even meta-contending, but I do think it's good enough to get you to the finish line if that's what you're looking for. Lastly, and probably most importantly, do I think this list will be fun to play? Yes, as long as you're not Iblee locking people. I'm not a fan of the Iblee lock, that's just my personal preference and playstyle, but again, to each their own. Don't hate the player. Hate Konami for putting toxic floodgates in their game. And with all that, I think we're done. I'll see you guys in the next video, and until then, Be safe, have fun.